The story of Icarus is a cautionary tale coming from Greek mythology about the dangers of unchecked pride, the limits of human ability, and the wisdom that it takes to heed the warning of those who may know better than you. Icarus was the son of a master craftsman named Daedalus, who had fashioned two pairs of wings out of feathers and wax. This was done to escape from Crete, where these two were imprisoned by King Minos. Daedalus, though, he warned Icarus to follow his flight path instead of flying too close to the sun or to the sea. But instead, Icarus was exhilarated by the ability to fly, and he ended up flying too close to the sun, melting his wax wings and causing him to plummet to his death in the Aegean Sea. Flash forward to today, and now the term flying too close to the sun, that can be used to describe one who is reckless, who displays contempt for the advice of others, and ignores the practicality or damaging consequences of their ambitious endeavors. Then we arrive to the NBA's Phoenix Suns, who just a couple years ago had the best record in franchise history. And ever since that moment when they made the NBA Finals, they flew too close to the sun and they made some moves, and ultimately they ended up plummeting towards the Aegean Sea. Welcome back to State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts, and Phoenix flew too close to the sun. Let's start off here with the first lesson that can be learned from the story of Icarus, and that is the limits of human ability. Icarus was not only enamored by the ability to fly, but it was such a stark contrast from being imprisoned that it was exemplified by that sense of freedom. But in that moment of nirvana almost, Icarus forgot the limits of human ability and flew too close to the sun. And we can see this with the roster construction of the Phoenix Suns. In the 2020-21 season, they go on to make the NBA Finals. They've got two All-Stars on the team, Chris Paul and Devin Booker. CP3, as a matter of fact, is fifth in MVP voting. So he is recognized as one of the more impactful players that the association has to offer. As for Devin Booker, this is someone who had shown plenty of talent at every stage of his career, but that individual success was not always in line with team success, largely because he hadn't had the right roster with him to this point. But with the addition of Chris Paul, you have one of the best playmakers, one of the best passers, one of the best facilitators that the NBA has ever seen. And that allows Booker, who is an adept creator in his own right, but largely in the interest of scoring for himself, that allows him to get to his spots and have the facilitating load taken off of him. He goes from averaging 6.5 assists to 4.3. And so while his individual production in terms of playmaking is down, his overall impact is greater in this moment. And this is something to keep in mind for later because he is not necessarily a natural facilitator. He is very talented in doing so, but he is absolutely a score-first guard. So having Chris Paul on the team alongside him in that backcourt, that's huge for Devin Booker. Coinciding with that, you also have a lot of great role players on the team at the time. You especially have Mikal Bridges, who is slowly rising into being recognized as one of the best role players that the league has to offer. And this team, they go on to make the NBA Finals. Ultimately, they lose, but with the addition of Chris Paul, the instant impact that he has, it doesn't seem very far-fetched for this team to win the big one the following year. In that following season, they win a team record 64 games. Devin Booker and Chris Paul are both All-Stars, and they also both finish top 10 in MVP voting. Mikal Bridges is second in Defensive Player of the Year voting, which is especially impressive as a wing, as typically that award, of course, favors the big man. So that is a major testament to the value of Mikal Bridges and what he means for this team. Not only as an offensive role player, but a defensive great for this team. Then you add in Cam Johnson as well, who's also proving to be a very good role player, finishing third in Sixth Man of the Year voting. And going into the playoffs, things are looking up for this team. They had won a franchise record amount of games in the regular season. They finished first in the Western Conference. And given that they made the finals last year, what's stopping them from doing it again? This is especially true after the first round. In that first round, Devin Booker had only played 3 games, but they still advanced and won in 6. So now, with Devin Booker not dealing with nagging injuries and the record highs that this team had, what's stopping you now? However, in the West semifinals, they would ultimately fall short and lose in 7 to the Dallas Mavericks. And at this point, things are still looking up for the Phoenix. Of course, especially in the fashion in which it was done, with a dominant showing from Luka Doncic sending you out. Things were not all butterflies and rainbows for the Suns, but largely, they had been experiencing a lot of success. Like Icarus, they are beginning to fly and sense that feeling of freedom. They are exhilarated. And what they do, though, they acknowledge the limits of human ability and recognize that even with all of the success, something needs to be done. A move needs to be made. And so they bring in Kevin Durant. He plays 8 games for them in the regular season, dealing with a little bit of a freak injury. But on paper, there's definitely some promise here. You have one of the greatest point guards of all time paired up with 2 of the best scoring threats that the NBA has to offer. In the case of KD, perhaps the best scorer that we've ever seen, as some would argue. But then they do forget the limits of human ability. They had so much success the prior 2 years. They're bringing Kevin Durant, and it seems like that is going to be a great move for them. But they're not satisfied. They want to fly higher. And they bring in Bradley Beal. And this is where things start going on a downhill spiral for them. They start plummeting towards the Aegean Sea. Because not only do they bring in Bradley Beal, but in the process, Chris Paul is gone. He is out of Phoenix. And looking back on it, a large part of the Suns' success could largely be attributed to the talents of Chris Paul and his ability to elevate a team. But now he's gone. And in his place is Bradley Beal. Now, this is a player who is certainly talented, but there have always been question marks, even from when the Suns made a move for him, about his ability as a winning player. See, Chris Paul, he doesn't necessarily always amaze you with his production, but his impact on a team and his ability to elevate them, as seen year after year with multiple different franchises, that was something that was truly special about him. And Bradley Beal, he comes in and he is the antithesis of that. This is someone who, just a couple of years prior, had scored 30-plus points a night for 2 consecutive years. Those are elite scoring numbers. But in doing it with the Washington Wizards and not a lot of talent surrounding him, and not a lot of team success surrounding him, it was not set in stone whatsoever that this move was going to positively benefit Phoenix. But they loved that sensation of flying, and they got too close to the sun with this move. They finished 6th in the West with a respectable record. Both Devin Booker and Kevin Durant are not only All-Stars, but they both make All-NBA teams. And while relative to the successes of years prior, this regular season was not as impressive, the 2023-24 regular season, going into the postseason, in a lot of critics' eyes, they have a matchup advantage against the Minnesota Timberwolves. But they wind up getting swept by Minnesota, and this season they failed to even make the playoffs because they had forgotten the limits of human ability. They forgot that much like Daedalus, Chris Paul had made the wings for this team to fly. And they were warned to follow his flight path. But instead, they went in a different direction. And they flew too close to the sun. And they built a roster that really stretches all of what D-Book and KD and Bradley Beal can do. Because these 3 are very talented scorers. But much as we were talking about earlier with Devin Booker, he is not necessarily a natural facilitator, a natural point guard. But taking a look at this team, he really had to take on that role. And his assists per game are back up once again to 6.9. But overall, it doesn't really feel like a winning formula. And you're stretching the limits of what these players can do because there's not a lot of depth on this team either. So they don't fit well, and there's not a lot of depth on this roster to help them out if someone needs a break. And yeah, you're really stretching human capabilities here, and you didn't follow the flight path of Daedalus and Chris Paul. So that's our first point here as we follow the story of the Suns and see how they failed to realize the limits of human ability ultimately. And then we get to the another point, the final point here about the caution that you should take with ambitious endeavors and the otherwise damaging consequences that can be created from ignoring practicality. Because for the Phoenix Suns, their endeavor, as with every other team in the NBA, is to win at the highest level, to become NBA champions. And in doing so, there's absolutely risks that have to be taken. You take a look at Nikola Jokic. This is someone who was a second-round pick, drafted during a Taco Bell commercial. The Nuggets had a big that they had trusted in Yusuf Nurkic, but ultimately they placed their trust in number 15, and he wound up being one of the best centers that we have ever seen. For the Boston Celtics, for years there were question marks about the duo of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, and if they could really lead this team over the top. After years of coming up short in the playoffs, they finally got it done and became NBA champions. Those were risky decisions. To trust this second round pick, to have patience in a league that moves so fast with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. And when those risks they pay off, that is great. But when they don't, when one becomes too ambitious with their endeavors, they start flying higher and higher, forgetting about the practicality of what it takes to win a championship, proper roster construction, time to build chemistry, and proper roles for a variety of players and putting them in positions in which they are most comfortable. And ignoring that practicality in favor of your ambitious endeavor, you fly too close to the sun. And that's precisely what happened with the Phoenix Suns. Then we get to where we are currently, today. This team has plummeted into the Aegean Sea. Mike Budenholzer has just been fired. It is not much of a secret that Kevin Durant might not necessarily be happy in Phoenix and might be looking to go elsewhere. There's a lot of teams looking his way. As for Devin Booker, he has been in Phoenix since the 2015 NBA draft. He has spent a decade there and is yet to win a title. And in the current NBA, loyalty is something of a lost art. So who knows how long he's going to be there. And then with Bradley Beal, his availability in production is not where you wish it would be, especially considering he's on a major contract. And notably, with that contract, he has a no trade clause. And all this combines to create the situation now for Phoenix in which the wax wings have been melted. They flew too close to the sun. They forgot the limits of human ability. They favored ambitious endeavors over true practicality. And now they've plummeted into the Aegean Sea. The future for this team looks more uncertain than it ever has in recent years. And even if both Kevin Durant and Devin Booker find their way out of Phoenix, you still have Bradley Beal on the team. And you don't have leverage in moving him out of there either, with his no trade clause. So with that, you can almost find yourself, if he's healthy, in a state of purgatory where he is a talented scorer, and he could take you to a place where you're not necessarily making the playoffs, but you're also not getting a super high draft pick. And it's not a great situation for Phoenix. They flew too close to the sun, and now they're paying the consequences. They are in the Aegean Sea. And that is all for today's episode of State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts. Thank you very much for listening. This is one I really like the concept of. I think we executed it all right. Recently, as it has become apparent to me, I've been trying to do a delivery that is quite energetic, but at times it can kind of feel inauthentic. It feels like I am just kind of sounding sarcastic about everything when I'm just trying to relay a passion for it. So we tried to just slow down the tone today. And I think, in large part, maybe only time will tell what it results in. But I think, in large part, it allowed me to focus on what I'm really saying and make sure everything draws back to the main point of this. And I hope it did. I hope it was clear and concise and a great callback to a great story from Greek mythology. And I didn't know where to fit this in, but I love to speak on the positive aspects of sport. So I just want to say for the Suns, Kevin Durant's a great player. Devin Booker is a great player who so often I think he does not get the flowers that he deserves. It's really a shame the situation that the Suns landed in to where they weren't quite a winning team with the roster construction. But there's some players who are a beauty to watch on this team. I love watching D Book. I love watching KD. And I wish the best for them, whether it's in Phoenix or elsewhere. But that's all for today's episode of Save the Association. I hope today's delivery was at least something different, maybe a positive change up. We'll see. I hope it was a clear, concise thing throughout with a proper line of reasoning, consistently calling back to Greek mythology. I really enjoyed the concept. I hope we executed it well. Thank you very much for listening. This has been State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts, and Phoenix has flew too close to the sun.